My name is Margaret Ellison. I am a retired family court judge from Nashville, Tennessee, and I spent 31 years making decisions about other people's lives from behind a bench elevated above everyone else in the room. 31 years of being the person whose judgment was, by institutional arrangement, final. And then in August of 2022, I had a ruptured brain aneurysm in my kitchen, and I was dead for somewhere between 7 and 9 minutes. What I experienced in that time dismantled every elevation I had ever stood on, and showed me something so much larger than judgment that the word itself has never quite recovered its former authority in my mouth. Let me tell you who Margaret Ellison was before the kitchen floor. I grew up in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, the only child of a father who was a county clerk and a mother who was a legal secretary and typed 112 words per minute without errors. I mention that because precision was the household atmosphere in which I was raised, not as a coldness, but as a form of love. My parents believed that doing a thing correctly was a way of honoring the thing. They applied this to everything from income taxes to Sunday pot roast, and they passed it to me so thoroughly that by the time I was 12, I was the child other parents pointed to as an example. That distinction sounds like a compliment. It functions over time as a form of pressure. Vanderbilt on a full scholarship. Law school at the University of Tennessee. Family court bench in Nashville in 1991. 31 years, thousands of cases. Custody determinations, terminations of parental rights, juvenile proceedings. I saw human beings at their most desperate and occasionally their most redemptive, and I tried to meet all of it with careful, evidence-based judgment. I was married to Howard for 36 years. Howard was an architect and the most genuinely patient man I have ever known, which you would need to be married to me. We had 2 children, Claire, a physician in Atlanta, and James, a high school principal close enough to Nashville that he came for dinner most Sundays. 4 grandchildren between them. I need to be honest about something before I describe what happened, because honesty is one of the things the experience made non-negotiable for me. I was afraid for most of my adult life. Not visibly, not from the bench. I was afraid in the interior sense, the deep structural fear that people who grow up as the precision child tend to carry into adulthood, and then organize their entire lives around managing. My fear was the fear of being found inadequate, of someone looking at the full record of Margaret Ellison and finding the gap between the performance and the person underneath. I carried guilt alongside that fear. Not guilt over genuine wrongdoing, but a background assessment of every imperfect moment, every case where I lay awake wondering if I had gotten it right, every night of 31 years examining the day's decisions for structural flaws. I had a long list. People who live the way I lived always have a long list. I did not know that the fear and the guilt were the thing I had been sent to solve until I was on the other side of the aneurysm. It is a Thursday morning in August of 2022. Howard has gone to breakfast with a former colleague. I am in the kitchen making coffee, reviewing a legal brief out of habit. The morning is entirely ordinary, and then the headache arrives. I want to be precise. The clinical literature calls it a thunderclap headache, sudden, explosive onset, the worst of one's life. That is accurate. What it does not capture is the quality, not like pain arriving, but like pain having always been there, and the previous absence of it having been the anomaly. It is total. It is immediate. It does not negotiate. I reach for my phone and call Howard. When he answers, I say, "Howard, I need you to call 911 and come home. I am having a neurological event." I say it with the same voice I used when delivering rulings that nobody in the courtroom would be happy with. Calm, direct, already past the emotion and into the procedure. Howard says, "I am already moving." The headache intensifies past what the word intensifies can hold. The kitchen floor arrives without my having decided to sit on it. I can see the underside of the table Howard built in 2003 from reclaimed barnwood. I am trying to keep the phone in my hand. I am trying to maintain the composure that 31 years has made available to me in extremity. And then the composure becomes irrelevant, because I am not on the kitchen floor anymore. There was no tunnel. I want to say that because some people expect one, and I did not have one. What there was instead was a transition so complete that the word understates it. The kitchen was simply no longer the context of my experience, and something else was, without any connective tissue between the two states. The something else was light. And I am going to attempt to say something specific about it that I think matters. The light was not neutral. It had a position. It was not the absence of darkness. It was the active, intentional presence of something that had decided to be there. The light had chosen to be present. I felt that choice as the first thing I felt in that space, and it reorganized my understanding of the entire concept. No pain. After what had just happened in my kitchen, I want to say that with the emphasis it deserves. No pain. No weight. No the accumulated physical inventory of 67 years. What there was instead was a quality of awareness so complete that my professional awareness, the attention I had brought to 31 years of judicial work, felt, by comparison, like trying to read a document through frosted glass. And then the presence arrived. Here is where I need to tell you about the fear and what happened to it. The presence had the complete record, not the judicial record, the actual record. Every decision I had reviewed at 3 a.m., every moment of impatience disguised as precision, every night of the 31 years, every entry on the list I had been maintaining since 1991. The presence had all of it, with a quality of knowing that made my own judicial attention look like a preliminary glance. And here is what the presence did with all of it. Nothing. I want to stay with that word because it is the most important word in my account. Nothing. Not dismissal. The presence was not indifferent. It had the complete record with full attention. And what it did with the complete record was nothing. No verdict, no assessment, no confirmation of what I had spent decades dreading. What there was instead was recognition. Not the recognition of a good performance, the recognition of a self, the recognition that goes past the record entirely, past everything that has been done and not done, to the thing that was there before the record began, the thing that was Margaret before Margaret knew she was supposed to achieve anything. The fear dissolved, not gradually, not through reasoning, the way a question dissolves when the answer arrives, not argued away, but resolved. The fear was predicated on the possibility of an adverse verdict. The presence was not a court. Standing inside it, I understood that the elevated bench had been, the whole time, my protection against a judgment that was never coming. The guilt dissolved with the same quality of resolution. Because guilt, I understood in that space, is what happens when we apply to ourselves a standard of perfection that was never the standard by which we were being measured. The actual standard was not perfection. It was whether we were moving toward love or away from it. The list I had maintained since 1991 was not evidence. It was the curriculum. What I was shown, delivered as complete and instantaneous knowing, was this: fear is the belief that you must earn what was given unconditionally at the beginning. And guilt is fear's administrative system, keeping the accounts of a debt that does not exist. My mother was there. The woman who had typed 112 words per minute without errors, and who had loved precision as a form of love, and had passed it to me in the only form she knew. She was there with something additional, an understanding of the cost of the template she had given me, delivered not as apology, but as recognition between two people who have both been inside the same beautiful, limiting story, and have now stepped outside it far enough to see its shape. The precision, the performance, the conditional worth, we saw the shape of it together. And what we saw was not a flaw in either of us. It was the curriculum that connected us. Howard was present in a way that was not physical, but entirely recognizable. The specific quality of patient attention that had organized our 36 years together. I understood in that space why Howard had been placed beside me for this specific life. The patience had been showing me for 36 years what the presence was like. I had been living with evidence of it and studying the case files instead. The return was not a choice. It was a clear communication that the work was not finished, not in the sense of achievement, but in the sense of application. Howard, Claire, and James, the grandchildren who were going to grow up in proximity to either a grandmother who had learned the lesson or one who had received it and been too cautious to apply it. I came back on the kitchen floor. Howard was kneeling beside me, with his hand on my face, saying my name in the voice of a man who has been patiently loving someone for 36 years and is not yet finished. I could hear sirens. I could feel the kitchen tile, the cool tile we had installed in 2009 that I had always considered slightly cold, and that I now found simply present, exactly the right temperature for a Thursday morning in August when you have just come back with information. I said, "Howard." He said, "I am here." I said, "I know. I have always known." 9 days at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Endovascular coiling surgery performed by Dr. Robert Adkins, who told me the location and size of the rupture were consistent with outcomes that did not generally include this conversation. I told him I had received assistance from a source outside his department. He was a thoughtful man. He wrote something in his notes. The integration has not been without difficulty, and I want to be honest about that. 31 years on an elevated bench produces habits of assessment that do not dissolve simply because you have been shown their limitations. I still catch myself constructing cases against myself. What is different now is that I can see the mechanism. I can name it. Fear is the belief that you must earn what was given unconditionally, and the naming interrupts it, and the interruption is sufficient to make a different choice. I stepped down from every position of volunteer authority I had accumulated. 2 non-profit boards, an advisory committee, a church committee. Not because the work was not valuable, but because the authority was serving the bench more than it was serving the purpose. I mentor young women in the law now, women building the precision armor I built, who do not yet know what it is costing them. I sit with them in coffee shops in Nashville, and I tell them what I was told. Here is what I want to leave with you, from a retired judge who was shown the inside of her own docket and found it, at the foundational level, innocent. The secret to overcoming fear is not courage. Courage is the management of fear. What I was shown is further than courage. Fear loses its authority when you understand its premise, and the premise is false. You are not earning a conditional love. You are living inside an unconditional one that was given before the performance began, and that no item on any list you have ever maintained has the capacity to reduce. The secret to overcoming guilt is this. Guilt is the administrative system of a debt that does not exist. The errors are real. The learning they produce is real and is the point. But the debt, the fundamental inadequacy that guilt is trying to document, that is not real. We are not on trial. I spent 31 years in a building where that was the organizing principle of every human interaction, and I am here to tell you from the inside that existence does not operate that way. The presence does not render verdicts, it recognizes. It holds the full record with complete attention and meets it with something that has no judicial equivalent. Come down from the bench. The verdict you are dreading is not coming. What is coming, what has always been coming, is recognition. The recognition of you, not the record, by something that has always known exactly what it was looking at and has never once found it wanting. We are known. We are held. We are loved past the last entry on the longest list any of us has ever kept. And we are innocent, at the foundational level, in the place that matters, innocent and loved and going home.